Yep, there we go. Okay, welcome. I've got the prototype up that you can check out at ibgib.space. Sorry about that. Let me get that. Oh, now live on my channel. Thanks. Ibgib.space. You can go there and you can check this out. I'm just going to go through what I have right now, including how I'm using it for this video. So without further ado, let's look over here. All right, so here is mine. Let's see what it looks like if a new profile goes to it. I've only got a couple minutes here, but I guess you did type that in. All right, so now you come here. I guess this is showing the light color scheme. Alexa, stop the timer. So we're just going to skip this. Just go down there. If you want to read the stuff, that's good. If it actually works, for some reason, Swiper doesn't like to work on various things. But anyway, let's go down here, hit go. You're going to give this space a name. So this is just your space for this browser, for this profile. And you got to really think of these as more of throwaway. So these are more like, you're at a job and, you have your profile at your job, that sort of thing. The ibgib stuff is going to be taking over how things interact in what we now think of as the cloud, or some people look at as P2P, but really that's kind of stuff's just going to go away. It's just going to be spaces. So for right now, this is a local data space. We're just going to say, testing, screencast, whatever. It's going to go away. This Firefox profile isn't going to remember it anyway. So it's going. See a little busy signal down there. Right now, it's just doing the initial generation of some of these ibgibs. So this whole website, now, if I weren't casting, I could disconnect, and this whole website is now on your local machine and should be able to run offline. So if you can, everything here, all the data that you're going to add, we're at this is our context, is the home. We say initial comment, which is a little play on words for the initial commits, because behind the scenes, we look at the nerd view here, we can see we're actually sort of interfacing almost directly with what you'd think of as the Git hash database. Only in our instance, everything is dog-fooded and spun up to where every single thing is a member of that database. So if we go over here and look at storage, it's using IndexedDB. So every single thing that we're doing in this app is in one of these ibgib data. So like down here in the content, if we can look at this, you can see it says ib, witness, blah, 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 blah. That's an ibgib record. So everything here, once it's downloaded, all of the data is local in your local space. Again, with the idea of you'll be able to connect using different spaces and configuring spaces to, create whatever you want for your architecture of your, whether you want to think of it as a cluster or, a consensus algorithm or a structure, whether you want to have three, it's send off to three different people or different strategies. through different spaces. That's all abstracted away to the concept of a space. And it only works because, again, everything folds back into this own data structure. And what that does is it allows us to send the data along with the metadata all as DLT projections. But anyway, so we'll look at that. Actually, it's very neat. This first part here. So I'm just going to do, here's the web space, the website URL. But now, right now we have, this is a little app bar. So there's a little generic app icon. Right now, we're just looking at this data. The whole thing is we're looking at the one data, right? In this case, our context is this ibgib, which is a timeline, which is covered with this data. That's our context. It's like what folder you're in, only your folder is in a DLT, right? It's in a DAG that tracks timelines within that DAG, sort of like Git. So we go over here. Right now, this interface is I'm still working on this for when you click on something, whether or not you navigate to it, or in this case, you bring up like a detailed view of it. But we're still, I'm a terrible, terrible UX person. If you're a good UX person, hit me up. Either, well, the YouTube comments, they seem to get regulated pretty heavily. Just start an issue on the GitHub. But so these genuinely decentralized apps. So this is not just, here's my apps, right? So each one of these apps has an ibgib. So if we go over here to apps, it's a little confusing maybe, but if we say click on the chat gib here, here's the state of that app. So it itself, its parameters and its settings and everything is an ibgib. It's recorded as an ibgib. So interestingly, these apps were part of that initial generation. So what I can do is, well, first let's just look to see what the to-do app looks like. First, we'll go back. And it's all slow because, again, I'm a terrible Angular person, a terrible Ionic person, a terrible UX person. If you're good at UX, hit me up. So we're looking at this as if it's a chat. So the only thing is we have our data. This is our data timeline. This comments right here. It's inside of another data timeline that we just came from, this other text. So when you write a comment, it creates a datum, it creates a timeline, and now that thing, it can act, intrinsically as like a file or like a folder that changes over time. So we go here. Now I've got to go in just a couple minutes. I just want to show you real quick. We're looking at this data as if it's a chat. That just means that we're just viewing it through our chat goggles, right? So I'm looking at it. If you're a hammer and you see nails, well, if you're a chat app, you see a linear list of a timeline of stuff that people have added. Now, I don't have the identity and stuff hooked up with this right now, but it's a view of this context ibgib, and it itself is its own ibgib. And so what that means is if we go over here to do, now we're looking, look, this stayed the same, right? Up here, we're still under genuinely decentralized apps, but we're looking at it through the lens of a to-do list. So 3 apps right now. There you go. We'll check off this one here. We'll go to these currently still are lame. But the idea is to get people to stop trying to shoehorn old paradigms into what is possible with real decentralization. Right. So people are still trying to make websites, and what I see of the decentralized apps and things, they're still thinking of old website stuff. But now, if you start thinking of your data being able to pass around your data and not thinking of the silo world, then apps become views into the same data. And so you can pass the same data among quote unquote apps, right? And so it all comes down to how well do you deal with timelines of data and passing them back and forth between these spaces. So that doesn't look anything earth-shattering, although it's pretty neat. But so here we can, since we're looking at this as if it's a to-do list, we can check that off. Now we can look over here. Another view is just the raw view. So now we're looking at genuinely decentralized apps, not like it's a chat. It's not a list of stuff. We're not looking at it as if, we want to know the various pieces of it that are related to it and check them off in a checklist. The raw app, its hammer goggles, it just wants to look at the data and see, if you look at the raw data, those these. Here's the raw JSON. So this is it's like an app that looks at this, if you want to think of it as a file, but it's not a file. It's looking at this timeline, and you're seeing the raw stuff for this timeline. Now, real quick before I go, here is the cool thing. Okay, we've already shown, here's raw gib. We've already shown that we can actually we went over here this way, but we can also do it on the app bar. That's the little navigate symbol. So here is the ibgib that stands for that raw app, right? But now we can go and we can create a new app. It's like a new reified version of it, or an instantiation of it. So we can actually create a new to-do app, call it, red team to do, or whatever. Right? Submit. Okay, so now you notice red team to do just showed up in our apps list, and it's also going to be up here, right? So now we can look at this. We'll go back to genuinely decentralized apps. And it's not going to have anything checked because this is a different app that has the same behavior, but it has different state to it. So now we have data at multiple levels. We have the data in here, we have this comment, and then we have the data that pertains to the application that we're looking at this comment. So notice these are not checked. If we go over here back to the to-do, which is just your default to-do, it's going to have this checked. And that's because behind the scenes, if we look at this, it actually has, or we can look at the raw. And then I got to go. But again, the UX sucks. I'm already aware of that. But we can go down here. Just the point is that to understand that apps are not what you think of as apps right now. Apps are a little bit more lightweight, and you can just create views in manipulators of data. So this thing, it created a to-do relationship on our context. So here's our thing. Here's my data. And that to-do list, what it did was, is it just added a relationship of the to-do name, and it has to-do app, here's our, we go to it. Here's the info app. That's the class name. Here's the name that's on our list, to-do gib. Here's the temporal junction point, just the gib part of it, or that may be that part. Here's the unique ID for the app, and then here's the temporal junction point. So when I want to go send something to somebody else, I can not only send to them the data, like sending a file to someone, I can send them the app. I can send both the data and multiple layers of metadata. So I can send them the data, the app, the app's metadata itself, the data's metadata itself, including authentication stuff. I can send all of those things and then reuse your transmission mechanism, the same one you use for authentication and for your authorization rules, to mutate data from step A to step B. But now we're just using it. Our two spaces happen to be differently in different physical locations, and whatever specs, whatever metadata you require for your availability. So say you have to have this at 3 other nodes or other spaces, which is a funny duality there. But if you require 3 different witnesses, you can have that on chain, and so everyone can see both the data, the metadata, and the metadata for the transmission, the metadata for the app, the metadata for the data. It's all, it simplifies the entire process. And in our future world, it becomes a very big deal of simplification of architecture when you have AI that are going to be creating data, when you have IoT that's going to be creating data, when you have people, when you have organizations, when you have multiple branches and organizations. You're going to have all these different things that right now you have just this spaghetti code of different people and how they interact, which is a good thing. But this adds to that a different aspect. It adds to that streamlined, simplified architecture that enables both per use case. If you want, real blockchain style, very slow but very sure of our checking in with a high belief in whatever you think of as the cryptography, you can have that. But with these, you can also disconnect your projections and just create data with no metadata. So it's a different system, but people are still thinking centralized, even though they're saying decentralized. They're still thinking centralized. So in this case, we're sending all the stuff, so you can actually have your data. You don't just expose silos of data via APIs, and then each different API has its own different authentication and all this other stuff. So anyway, that's it. I got to run. Thanks for watching, if you're watching. So yeah, have a good one.